All right, I'd like to call our meeting back to order. Moving on, we are now moving into offsite levies update.
Okay, so the one in front of you for offsite levies, there was a bylaw passed in 2014 and is when we did our last or when we put in offsite levies. At the time, it said we would update the levies once we had developed and passed our master plans, which was completed in 2019. Therefore, our current levy system is in 2024 will be 10 years old, and the cost of infrastructure we know is constantly increasing, and even how levies are done and calculated often changes over time as well. So it's being put forward that we think it's time to revisit that and bring in a consultant to help work with us and council to develop a new offsite levy model.
Thank you. Councilor Taylor.
What are the indications that the offsite levy model is out of whack or not working for our town? Other than doing this just because of some time frame here.
Through the council, through the chair to the rest of the council, that's a great question. That I don't really have a good that I don't really have a great answer for. I mean, other than, you know, the levy model that we have doesn't increase with escalation as inflation happens. Therefore, if a developer came in today, the levies that they would be charged would be based on the costs back in 2014 instead of 2024. And so they'd be getting essentially a bargain compared to what the current costs would be, which is why I think they need to be updated.
Councilor Taylor.
Yeah, well, I'd rather do this based on some sort of problem that we have to solve, not on some sort of you know, date. Like, and I don't hear complaints from developers or anything about the levies. You can't tell me any problems, so I'm not seeing the need to do this project at this price.
Through the council, through the chair to council, this type of thing is like re-looking at your water or sewer fees or even your tax rate. As things change over time, you need to look at it and say, am I still charging the right amount? Am I still charging the right price? It's just, unfortunately, it's such a complicated process that it costs money to review whether or not you're charging the right prices. If our prices are really out of date, you're not going to get a complaint from the developers, because as prices get out of date, they become too cheap, not too expensive. If you do this, you'll probably get complaints from developers, but your citizens will have reduced taxes because they'll be receiving money from the developers.
Sure, and if they were too cheap, you'd be able to tell me that they're too cheap, because we would know if this can, that'd be easy comparison to surrounding towns or something.
Part of the process of doing this project would be comparing to other towns and that sort of thing. Like they look at the cost of all your infrastructure. They look at what other municipalities are doing. It's a pretty in-depth project to come back to you with recommendations of what those levies should be.
Councilor Taylor, Councilor Hawes, and then Councilor Race.
Yeah, I guess the only comment I can make is we have to be, I think, careful that we're not just waiting for a problem and then fixing it. Because if we do that, then that's what happens when things start to pile up. And I'm not saying I'm for it or against it yet, but I'm just, I mean, it's not always about having a problem and fixing it. It's avoiding potential problems. And I appreciate the conversation in regards to, are we charging enough? And if we haven't looked at it since 2014, we know that things have drastically changed in many facets of, financial world and stuff, to understand that a little more and make sure that we're charging enough. I think is good business. So like I said, I'm not gonna reach consensus yet. I'm interested to hear what other councilors think, but that's where I'm at this point. Thank you.
Councillor Haas, CAO.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be a little bit more bold in my answer. There is a problem, and the problem is that in 2014, we didn't have water, sanitary, storm, transportation master plans to go off of. We know for a fact that in 2014, the infrastructure that was installed and the cost of that is significantly lower than it is today. So we do know there's a problem. To what degree there's a problem, we really don't know, and how far out of whack we are, but we are late in ensuring that we are updating and charging accordingly for our offsite levies. They are out of date and they are low. Now it's just who should be paying that, because as of right now, the taxpayers are paying for that shortfall, right? And what we're talking about is, do we want to look at this as a way of equitably distributing costs to new infrastructure, new builds, and and who should pay for that? So if we want to be equitable on that front, we do know there's a problem that would need to be addressed.
Thank you, CAO. Councillor Reese.
Thank you, sir. What reserve would this be coming from?
I will refer that to Alicia.
My apologies, I did not look up the funding source for this item prior to, it wasn't marked as an administrative priority, so I did not look it up. My apologies.
But it is coming from the reserve, right?
It did be, yes.
Yeah. And my thinking right now is it's $100,000 touch, but how much are we losing by not moving ahead on this? It could be hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reese. I do have comments, but I'm gonna save them until there's a consensus request. I'm not gonna debate something that's not on the table. Councillor Haas.
Yeah, so thank you, CEO Panasic, for your forwardness, based on that. I will move that we seek consensus to include the offsite levies update to the 2024 budget. And I'm not prepared to, I spoke to it already, and based on what CEO Panasic has shared with us, I think it's valuable to do that, and it's in the long run, it is protecting our taxpayers or ratepayers from making those extra costs potentially. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. You have a clarifying question. Then there was a question about where this would be funded from, and the comment was that it would be funded from reserves. So why is there a tax implication if it's being funded from reserves?
So through the chair to all of council, the data before you in the operational business cases brings on the expense portion. I did recall last year in some of our meetings for budget, we had brought forward a couple of projects in recreation, and we put the net cost after the potential grant that we would have. So we haven't included funding sources for this to reduce the tax implication. We wanted to come forward with whole numbers, so we weren't doing mental gymnastics of going back and forth as we caused council to do last year in the budget meetings. So there will be a reduction in the potential tax rate once we build in all those funding opportunities.
Okay. Good. Thank you. It's good to know. Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Couldn't this come from the offsite levy fund? Like, that's a separate fund that affects a separate fund external to taxes, right?
Through the chair, yes, absolutely it could. I did not look up the value or the balance of that
I mean,
fund.
it seems logical that this is a fund related expense, and that's a separate pot of fund money that's separate to to, you know, the capital fund and the taxes and that sort of, and it's entirely appropriate for this, it seems to me. One more,
Sure, go ahead.
then the question is the amount, right? So can we do this, can we do, this seems like a really high amount of money for this kind of stuff. Like, can we do this for half the amount, 50,000? Do a credible effort and at least get something started without having to.
Through the chair of council, we can certainly work with those that do this work to, you know, you could note this item and we could bring it back to council when we know the exact value before moving ahead. I think this is close to what it would cost. But we haven't priced it to know exactly what it would cost, so we could do it as a noted item. Obviously, we're always trying to look for value of money when we do anything. But that's what we thought it would cost.
Thank you, council. Councilor Taylor,
You know, my preference would be like the parking lot, to wait and see what it would cost.
thank you, Councilor Taylor, council. So I'll speak to it. I won't be in support of having this included in the 2024 budget. I don't dispute at all that this is out of date and it's time for a review. $100,000, you know, in something that's not an administrative priority, though, doesn't rise to the top of my list. I would actually prefer that something could be equitably done for review of the offsite levy bylaw internally. And if that's just, you know, simple, high level, you know, rate of inflation added for what the value of the previous per, I think it's per acre price was for offsite levies, plus review, you know, quick high level overview of what our comparable communities are charging for offsite levies. And if that was brought forward to council for bylaw revision, that's certainly something I'd welcome and very much would consider. But spending $100,000 for a consultant right now with the budget the way that it is and all the asks for it, it's not something I can support. Thanks, Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just curious, Sienna Panasic, with your comment about it being a possible problem, but not identifying this as a priority. And I know that's a difficult process, I realize, because everything's a priority, but what do we take on? But this particular one, I'm curious on what took it off the priority list potentially.
So, through the chair to members of council, so this wasn't included as administrative priority because offsite levies are a tool that ultimately you don't really need, right? But what we're doing by not updating it is slowly over time, whether we're consciously aware of it or not, we're shifting the burden of infrastructure from individuals who are developing or building or anything new onto the general taxpayers, right? And that just happens as a general process over time. So, you know, you could eliminate the offsite levies altogether. You would just have to tax a lot more, right? So it's really just a tooling where you, on how you get the money. You know, I think it's an effective and it's a useful tool. But it's not a tool that's absolutely necessary for the continued operations for any municipality.
So if I can follow up with that, if I may, with that, I hear what you're saying. I think I would like to see this happen. However, we do have, you know, a budget. However, I think we have options that I'm hearing over here to with Alicia or Miss Barbeau. Yeah, that there may be other funding options to do this that's not on taxation. And I appreciate the conversation too, because what I'm hearing is that we haven't flushed all that out yet. Right now, we're just looking. So even looking at the numbers for taxation is not really at all accurate at this point. So I would urge council to at least leave it on the 2024 budget to see where it might come from, and we can always remove it afterwards, but getting an idea, because if it doesn't come from taxation, you know, and it's gonna benefit, I think there's reason to proceed with this at this point. And if it doesn't go through, I think we definitely, personally need to consider for 2025. So that's my only thought. Thank you.
Councillor Haas.
Through the chair to all council, I also would want to do a little bit of homework on Councillor Stashik's comments, because I'm not sure that it's something we can do in-house or should do in-house. In that, I think there is processes where we can be challenged or appealed on the offsite levy, and you need to be able to defend your calculations in terms of how you got to the numbers. And so it may not be a good task to have done in-house because it's not a third party. But that's something I'd like to do a little more homework and bring back if you put this in the parking lot.
Councillor Race.
So is there a motion?
Yeah, Councillor Haas's motion to include it in the 2024 budget.
And then I heard Stuart saying he wanted it first. So the initial motion was,
The motion that's before us right now is to include it.
Okay.
Yeah, so Councillor Taylor was just stating his preference.
oh, okay, and I will support the initial motion.
Okay, Councillor, any other comments or questions? Councillor Haas.
So what I'm hearing, if I can have some clarification, some at the table would be amenable to putting it in the parking lot to have a further discussion on it, or because I'm willing to make that amendment if it means that we get more information and have a more, again, an opportunity to explore it. Now, if that's not the case, then I'll just leave it the way it is. But I could amend, I'm open to amend it if someone's willing to, or the rest of the council is willing to have it in the parking lot. I guess that's the question to council.
I'm not sure that's the case.
Okay,
So I have myself in queue and I can
Oh,
speak
sorry.
to that. For me, it doesn't matter where it comes from unless it comes from a grant.
okay,
If there's a granting body out there that's gonna give us 100 grand to do this, great. If not, I don't want to see them coming out of the offsite levy reserve, because that is money that could be better spent on water and sewer upgrades or some other infrastructure upgrades. Because that's the intent of offsite levies, is it grows pays for growth. I don't want to see it come through taxation. That's 100 grand in taxation to do it for a consultant to do a review. I would like to see that it could be done in-house. We come up with something equitable that council could support. That's realistic. That's about all the revenue sources we have at our disposal. So unfortunately, I wouldn't support parking lotting it until we get where the funding source is going to come from.
Okay. Right.
Council, anyone else like to speak to it? Okay, if there's nothing else from council, then we would call the question. The consensus request to include offsite levies update in the 2024 budget. All those in favor? And opposed? That did not carry, with Councillor Taylor and Ostashik voting against. Councillor Haas.
so then I'll see consensus to remove it from the 2024 budget. I have
If you want to speak to it.
yeah, real question, I guess a question to administration, because I recall in the past budget, I don't know if it was the last budget or the budget before, there was some items that similar to like this one, where we don't have the appetite right now, but there is some appetite to have a discussion going into the next year to look at it, what other options we have, and we had a kind of a parking lot for that kind of stuff. Is that something we're doing in this budget period, like earmarking some things that were like this vote where it got defeated, we took it out, but there's still possibly interest in the future?
Through the chair, I don't quite remember that exactly. I remember we did go forward with some noted projects that had a few items that we needed to iron out prior to spending any money.
Right,
Or the parking lot, or referring it to the 2025 item,
okay,
or sorry, the 2025 budget, and that just gave us a little bit of time to bring forward more information or have further discussions if necessary, but,
Okay.
as Jude might have a better recognition than me.
Thank you, CEO Passick, and if I may, Chair. A number of those projects that CEO Passick is referring to were recreation and community services projects, so I remember them quite well. Some of them had a small amount of budget. And direction to administration was to not spend any money until an RFP had been brought back to council. And one or two of them had no budget, same direction, to explore a little bit further and then bring back an RFP to council. And so we did note those, and we ensured to bring them back, and it felt to be successful to the projects of the particular type that we had, which we're not certain, but that had merit, some merit.
If I may, just one more follow-up. So I realize this is not the meeting to do it, but in our next meeting. That would be appropriate potentially if a counselor had appetite to make a motion, that it's not part of the budget, but that we bring forward. An item to a committee of the whole meeting on this, that would be an option that we would have. And is it, the intent is when you bring back the documents, the things we didn't do, the things we did do at this meeting. So we have a record of that in front of us, just in case we flip flop or whatever. Okay, perfect. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Council, any additional comments or questions? Yeah, I would comment, I am going to support excluding it, but what I would like to see come forward is actually a review of the whole offsite levy bylaw. I was on council, Councillor Taylor was on council at the time, the last time. Sorry, I wasn't Councillor Taylor was, but I do remember it very well. And there were some pretty significant changes to the offsite levy bylaw at that time. And I would like a comprehensive review of it to make sure that we're still compliant, that we're still effective. And part of that can be the rate that we're charging for our offsite levy bylaws. And coming up with options, report to council with some options on a fair, equitable, and financially responsible way to be able to update that bylaw and associated fees. Like as Councillor said, that could come as a direction, a future meeting at some point. Hopefully that does come forward. In the meantime, though, there is a consensus request to exclude the offsite levies update from the 2024 budget. Any last minute comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of excluding? And all those in favor of including? That was carried 3-1 with Councillor Race voting against. Okay, so if there's nothing further for the offsite levies update, we could move on to asset management program development 2024.
Okay, you're probably beginning to not like the term asset management, but here we are again. So this is the next phase of the software development where we currently use software called Citywide. You buy the software in modules. They help you populate it. They're working with many municipalities across Alberta and Canada. And we're fairly well invested already. Our GIS is already in there. Our asset management's in there. Our CTV camera work that we're doing right now is going to be in there. But this, and we're, as you can see, some of this is marked 2023. We're currently working on this EGIS and the external map. And the reason we're doing that is currently we're using 2 systems and we have duplication. When this project's complete, we can get rid of the duplication and have everything under one house. So that's what numbered 4 and 5 there on the first page is referring to. But these costs that are before you are for 1, 2, 3, and a little bit of 6. It is basically moving our work order system into the Citywide, so that when we currently right now we run 2 systems. We have Citywide for our GIS and our asset management, and we have a different system for our work order system. And when we do a work order and complete it, currently there's no tie, there's no record, other than, I mean, we have a record that we did the work as a work order, but it doesn't get recorded to the asset. And so if we do a work order and replace a valve, currently that valve doesn't change in our asset management system unless we go in and do it manually, and we haven't had the manpower to keep up to that kind of stuff. So this is the next phase of asset management, to get to the point where the work that we're doing every day gets tracked to the assets that we have. And that's why it's fairly expensive. Most of the cost that's before you is in actual taking our data and getting it usable into the software. About 25,000 of it is the actual software itself. The rest is actually getting the data in and usable. And this also will be the Hinton Listens software that council has talked about wanting better software so that we can be track how fast we get back to people. This is part of that solution as well.
Thank you, Councilor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the breakdown of the cost is the maintenance management software at 19.5, then the citizen request portal 55. 87,000 for the data integration training costs, and then there's the 15 new iPads at 15,000. That's the breakdown of the 125.
I'm glad you have that because I'm missing that.
Where is that?
It's right beside the financial.
Oh, there it is. It was grayed out. There you go.
So that's the breakdown. And so my question then is, and I know you said about the asset management, but I mean, asset management for me is important, but how close are we to the finish line? Because I did see there's no year 2, no year 3 for software. So how close are we to the finish line financially, that we have a robust system of asset management?
Through the chair of the rest of the council, the short answer is, I think we'll be in a place that we'll be comfortable with for a while. The other side of that, and I've said this to a few times to quite a few people, is that asset management is sort of like a black hole if you let it, in that it will take as much resources as you're willing to throw at it.
Right.
And what you need to be careful of is that you get a system that does what you need, and that you're not trying to keep up to the Joneses. We will never keep up to the city of Edmonton's or the city of Calgary's or Red Deer's, and we'll always be jealous of their systems because they can throw more resources at them. But we do need to get to the point where we can be proactive and know what maintenance happened, and not make and properly prioritize our projects, because we have very limited dollars. And then that's the goal, is to get to that point. And I think that this will get us close to there.
Okay, so that's my follow-up is, and you said close to there, but we're on the track to be pretty much at that point. But we may not see any costs, what I'm hearing, for a while. We may find some other costs potentially, but at this point of 125,000 getting this software, we would be able to utilize that asset management and it would benefit us at this point.
Yes.
Okay.
The one place we still will struggle is that we don't have a lot of staff. We've managed to rearrange the staff a little bit in that we've repurposed one person to do this particular task about half a year at a shot. So I think that's as much as I can support for the next couple of years anyway, that gets us to the point where let's get this all working.
Because thank you, Mr. Jim.
Thank you,
Ben.
Council. Councilor David.
This asset management work, just the software and getting the system going, seems like a black hole to me. Like it's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. Is that our problem? Like we've tried to keep up with the Joneses? Is that why we've got to such an expense to come up with a system that would keep track of, this kind of stuff? have we like over purchased and over built what we're doing, not remembered that we're a small town?
Through the chair, I don't believe we've done that yet. I think we are very average for the size of our community where we're at in terms of our GIS and our asset management system. I've seen people who are certainly way ahead of us, and I've seen people that are certainly way behind us. So I think that we are certainly moving in where we need to be. But we just recently spent a session that talked about the importance of it, and we were to that point where, you know, we're starting to have an understanding at the very high level, but we don't have the data to drill down to actually use, to have a decision-making tool as to which water pipe is the most important one to be replacing now, and that's where we need to get to.
Thank you, Councillor, or thank you, Councillor Taylor, Councillor Haas.
Yeah, I guess for me, the reason I agree with to a certain degree with Councilor Taylor, I guess the reason. It seems like a lot and it may seem like a lot is we chose a path of the tortoise instead of the hare. And we've stretched it out quite a ways that, you know, it seems like more, and if we might have put it all into one shot, got it done, purchased all the software, but we've stretched it out. To get to this point to try to offset the cost, but what I'm hearing is we're almost there. We're at the finish line potentially, maybe a next wave from it, but and I think, you know, in the long run, the data that we're gonna get is going to, it may not save us right away, but those decisions and prioritizations of what our assets are and what needs to be changed and all of the whole purpose of the asset management. And to delay it any further, I think is just, you know, we need to get to that point and be done with it and get that data and get that information so we can start seeing that benefit of it. So on that note, I'm gonna move to consensus to include this in the 2024 budget. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You, Councillor Haas, Council, we have a consensus request now, Councillor Race.
Thank you, sir. I will support this. I can remember back in 2018, Councillor Hawes and I went to Stony Plain and attended our first asset management session. And we have just been so eager to see this take off in Hinton. I don't care if we're the turtle or the hare, we're getting it done. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Race. For myself, I'll support this moving forward. Tortoise or hare, I don't really care either. But what I want to see is the finish line.
Yeah.
I'm with Councillor Haas. It seems like it's been since forever that we've had $100,000 a year budget requests associated with asset management. And I'm hoping this is the last one for a while. And that we can have a complete functional system moving forward that can help us with our asset management program. So I will support this one. Hopefully, hopefully that's not too many more. Council, any other comments, questions? Councillor Taylor?
I don't support it, not at that dollar amount. I might support it at a lower dollar amount, but. Yeah, we got a really high potential tax increase here. Thanks.
There's no one else in queue. I'd ask a follow-up question to that then. If council did have an appetite to go with lower dollar value, what would that mean moving forward? Would that just mean that finish lines further away time wise and dollars get spread out more, or can we finish it with the lower dollar value?
With the chair of council, I would have to go back and talk to the person to see. I mean, I don't see us having any movement on the 19,500 or the 5,500. Could we do it with less iPads? Potentially, we could look at that value. And then the data migration and implementation and training costs, that's the part where I would have to go back and talk to them and see, you know, could we break that up? Could we? I would have to have that discussion with them.
Okay. It's likely not gonna reduce the cost, though, it's just gonna push the finish line out.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Council, any other comments or questions? Okay, seeing nothing further, then we call to question the consensus request to include asset management program development 2024 in the 2024 budget. Council, all those in favor? And opposed? It was carried 3-1 with Councillor Taylor in opposition. Take nothing further on that. We can move on to affordable housing agreement with Evergreens.
So this one that's before you is one of the ones that you don't have a lot of options on. In that it's in an agreement between us and Evergreens to operate that facility now that it's there. It's before you.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Councillor Haas.
Yeah, see consensus that we include the affordable housing agreement with the Evergreens for the 2024 budget. And
Want to speak to it?
not much to say, but I mean, I again appreciate Evergreens and the partnership and running that facility for us, you know, and they got it built quite quickly, so, you know, they've already demonstrated professionalism that way, so and we want to continue that relationship, and we are contractually obligated, so yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Council, we have a consensus request. You would like to speak to it, Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, I have a question on the expensive housing program for low income people. What are this $20,000, what's that for? Do we have to give all that this year? Is that an ongoing thing? Is that something that we could give 10,000 this year and 10,000 next year, or
No,
what's that used for?
through the chair to all of council, that is a yearly cost, and it is to cover or share in any losses that happen. It is for maintenance as well as if the income isn't covering the cost, it will also help in terms of covering a shortfall on the actual operating costs of the facility versus the amount of rent coming in. So it's both making sure there's enough money to run the place given the limited money coming in, but or to cover maintenance. These facilities tend to be high maintenance just by the turnover that goes through the places, and so that's why that's in there.
Follow up. Maybe I didn't hear it right, but I was under the impression this would be close to a break-even prospect. And now I've been told that it's $25,000 a year. Did I hear wrong when we first approved this?
Through the chair, I'll take that, because Mr. McLaughlin wasn't here, but break even was a optimistic projection that was provided, but it was communicated that that's optimistic, that's where we hope to get right in around that break even point, but it all depends on who the people are who are qualifying for it, because it depends on their income. So if we do, you know, there's been a few people who have moved in recently who are actually going to be at market rent for a short period of time, so that bodes well. So we may bodes well for us, but it all depends on who we're going to get. But the money is there in order to backstop in the case of operational losses, which is a good probability, at least in some years. But that is the intent, is that we're hoping to get these to a break-even point or close to.
Thank you, CEO. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, I won't be voting for this. I would encourage when we manage this to try to get people in here who can at least keep with the original premise of this as a break even. So that's my thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Haas.
So for clarification, this is already in the agreement. we've already established agreement with Evergreen's Foundation to these costs, did we have, you know?
Yeah, through the chair, so they have to manage based on the parameters that they're provided, so we really don't have the authority to say. These are the people who will be let in at a higher income because they do have those parameters that they have to abide by. Now, we always hope that we're gonna get more money, but we have to comply with the parameters of the housing unit and the legislation or the rules that Evergreen's is required to comply.
Thank you, CEO. Council. Okay, seeing nothing further from council. We do have a consensus request that we'll call to question to include affordable housing agreement with Evergreens in the 2024 budget. Council, all those in favor? And opposed? That is carried 3-1 with Councillor Taylor in opposition. There's nothing further on that one. You can move on to community services, FCSS comparative study.
Good evening, council. I will be brief. I can see the timeline on this. So I'll start with the FCSS comparative study. Council will recall that on October 3rd, council meeting, administration was directed as follows. The resolution is there for you. At the time, council had listed all of the comparative municipalities, which are 7, and so including Hinton, that would be 8. This OBC is to propose that we do 4 or 5 plus Hinton. Just scale it back a little bit, just because I think that was council's intention, if I recall the discussion. So we've gotten some sort of high level quotes from the kinds of consultants that do this work in the province. And we are seeing a pricing of about $20,000 to $30,000. It sounds like a lot of money. And these are professionals. They will have a strong acquaintance with FCSS and social needs assessments and that kind of work. But they're going to have a close look at Hinton, get to know us. They're going to have a look at the other municipalities and get to know them and why they're delivering the services that they're delivering and how they're doing it. So there's quite a bit of background work for the consultant to produce the study that we're talking about. So with that, I'll take any questions that you have. There's some risk assessment statements there. They're not unfamiliar with them, so I won't repeat.
Thank you, Ms. Jude. Council, any comments or questions or directions? Nothing? Councilor Haas?
Well, I mean, this is a motion of council already that we do a comparative study. And the fact that administration at the time said that internally, this is not something that could be produced. This is a direction of council. So remind if we want this done, then this is the only way it's going to happen. So I'm gonna make a consensus to include it in the 2024 FCSS or in the 2024 budget, the FCSS comparative study. And if I can speak to it, I put it forward as a consensus because I am behind council. I did not vote for the comparative study, but I'm behind council's motion and this $20,000 to make it happen. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Haas. So council, we do have a consensus request now. Any comments or questions? Councilor Reese?
Thank you, sir. Like Councillor Haas, I did not support the initial motion, but I will support consensus. And I would like to see this move forward.
Thank you, Councilor Reese. Council, anything further? Now for myself, I'll support this moving forward as well. This was this was fairly important to council in the sense that it was passed with motion of council. I think there was an appetite of council to have a better understanding of our FCSS, the programs it offers, and how that compares with a bunch of our comparable communities. So I do want to see this. I think it's valuable information for both council and the community. Any other comments or questions, council? Okay, seeing none, then we will call to question The consensus request to include FCSS comparative study in the 2024 budget. Council, all those in favor? That is carried unanimously. If there's nothing further for that, we can move on to the established landscaping and boulevard sign maintenance.
Thank you, and I'll just mention, oh, do you want to go ahead?
Sorry, Chair, if I could, just for council's awareness, we did have discussions about this one internally, and we thought that this may be a better 2025 item. The rationale behind it is the parks maintenance and level of service is gonna be coming forward, and I think that would be a good wholesome discussion on this and a lot of others, and you know, you can certainly see that there is some catch up to do in how we've been doing it, but I think that ultimately comes from the policy dictating the budget and not the budget dictating the policy, so we are I think it's important, but we were talking about this being 2025.
Leave it there because that's exactly what we have talked about.
Okay. Councilor Taylor,
I like to see consensus that we take this off the budget for 2024.
okay, so just remove it.
Yeah.
Because there was a suggestion from CEO Panasic that maybe this fits better in 2025.
Okay, if they want to do that.
It's up to you, whatever you want.
I don't think it makes a difference. Yeah, let's put this in 2025.
Okay. So included in the 2025 budget discussions. Okay, Councilor Haas.
Yeah,
Sorry, we do have a consensus request now. Councilor Haas.
I appreciate, you know, the fact that we're gonna have the level of service. I do appreciate this coming forward though, because one of the things that I hear a lot in our community is in regards to this very matter. There's things in disrepair, there's things not necessarily taken care of very well. So I'm happy that it's gonna be as a whole discussion to the service level of that and get on our way to getting some of these areas cleaned up and stuff, because that is one thing that beautification of our community has. And for various reasons, but I'm not gonna get into, but I'm glad that we're moving towards that and fixing those things up, so, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Haas. Council, anything else? Comments, questions? Councilor Lees.
Thank you, sir. Does Community in Bloom assist in the overall beautification of the town?
Well, thank you through the chair to the rest of council. I haven't looked at communities in bloom for a long time. My understanding is they're more of a judgment, kind of like they'll come into your community, they'll make judgments. You get promotions for your community, it's a tourism building thing, but I don't recall if there's any grants essentially for it. No. But we do, yeah.
It's after the fact, yeah. So
Right.
you're already beautiful. They'll give you money.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
In short.
so we're not getting money. Okay,
Oh, that's.
all right.
We're beautiful.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Duke. Council, any other comments or questions? Okay, if there's nothing else from council, we will call the consensus request the question to include reestablished landscaping and boulevard sign maintenance in the 2025 budget. Council, all those in favor?
Wait a sec, sorry, could you restate that, please?
To include reestablished landscaping and boulevard sign maintenance in the 2025 budget.
That's what I thought. Thank you.
Okay, all those in favor? That's carried unanimously.
All right, now to run the risk of confusing everybody with this OBC, the way it was written. This OBC is asking for an additional $15,000 only to the Canada Day budget, for the budget, operating budget for Canada Day celebrations in 2024. So I just want to run through this because it is looking a little confusing.
So
So I'll take you right through it. So last year, 2023, council approved a $20,000 increase in OBC for $20,000 in the operating budget for Canada Day celebrations in 2023. We staged that. The experience of it was that it cost $7,525 more than that. So we have actual expenditures of $27,525. This is the first year that the town of Hinton has done the whole celebration, and this was due in part to an unforeseen lack of volunteers and scheduling of staff on a weekend, which cost us more money than we really anticipated. So a little bit of inexperience few years cold on it. So we did have a real experience of 27,000. We are budgeting 28,000 in a little bit in the 2024 budget for Canada Day. That's already in the operating budget. That is not this OBC.
Okay.
This OBC is about $15,000 fireworks, yes or no? And the reason why this is being brought forward is we couldn't do fireworks in 2023. Which saved us $15,000. I should have mentioned the grant that we got, but we didn't. I didn't mention it. A $10,000 grant we did get. It was unforeseen revenues in 23 as well. So our actual costs net were within budget. That's confusing even more. So in 2024, the question before council is, do we want to include the cost of fireworks in our 2024 Canada Day celebrations or skip fireworks? And the reason for it is that they are high hazard. It's usually taking place during the fire ban. And fireworks are increasingly unpopular with the general public that see it as a noise impact on domestic animals, livestock and wildlife. We didn't receive any complaints about not having fireworks in 2023. Everybody likes fireworks, but also nobody noticed they weren't happening this year. So that was kind of interesting. So we will, in 2024, just to assure you, will seek grant for Canada Day, reduce the cost by efficiencies. We have budgeted what we think we need, but we'll hopefully use less, get some grant funding. The question before council in this OBC is, do we want fireworks or not? And that's the cost of them.
Great, thank you, Stu. Council comments, questions?
Yeah, I have a question, and it's a little unorthodox, and it's not in here, but I want to ask it. Have we ever looked into, because I agree with you with the fact that they are possibly a fire hazard. I know for a fact too that the noise does potentially, I mean, I'm not saying it's a large part, but the other issue that I think that's come up in the past is where we do it and the mess that it does make in that area and the amount of staff time it takes to clean it up. So that's my lead into, have we ever looked into what budget would be for drones? Because that is a new phenomenon that's happening in many communities. And it doesn't take any staff, you contract it out. And it is a fantastic drone show with no noise, no nothing, it's all lights, and it is amazing. I've seen it a couple of times myself, I've seen it on TV. Yeah, so I'm just curious if there's ever been any look into that alternative.
Thank you for the question and to share it to the rest of council. Staff have brought that up. I have never seen one, and I had never heard of that until staff brought it up this year. It is certainly an environmentally sound option. I believe it costs more, but we haven't got a price for you on that. I think it would be innovative. It would be very interesting for Hintonites, something new and fresh. And it would be fun to explore that. So we certainly could explore it and bring back costing to you if you'd like to consider it. So on that note, I do think it's unique and something different, and it is exciting. And in fact, I think it all kind of really started on an American TV show that they had a group that it was something to do with talent, and they brought it in. It was fantastic, and it started to grow so I would like the parking lot this matter until we get potentially with council's approval, of course, but some information on the costing to that instead of the fireworks.
So that was a consensus request.
Yes, please.
Parking lot with additional information.
Yep.
Kate, council, we have consensus request, Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, I'm good with that. I mean, I've seen some fantastic drone shows of, really great. So if we could do that for the same amount of money, that would be fine. I'm also good with fireworks, so I think either would be fine. And just not doing anything is not a good idea, but by all means, if there's a fire hazard or something, of course we won't do it, right? It's up to the fire chief to tell us that. And
Councillor Ross.
Yeah, if I may too, I think it's another opportunity too, that we don't have to also do it in that area. We could do it someplace else that's more parking, more ability. My thought is the Mary Reimer Park. They've got that open green space there where drones can set up, everybody can be in the park. You know, it's just, I don't know, it seemed, because there it was either you're in the car and it was a congestion, but there's other options that might be available to this, so. I mean, I don't know what the cost is, and I mean, I agree with Counselor Taylor, I mean, if it's a lot more, but to me, if it's not much more, I definitely like to consider it, and for council's consideration, so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Haas. Council, any comments or questions? I did have a question, and I guess it could be for council, could be for admin. We tied to doing drone or fireworks on Canada Day, or would we entertain a different date option? And I ask because a few years ago, council authorized an expenditure for a fireworks display on Halloween, and it was very, very popular. It was, we got lots of good feedback from it, it's positive feedback. The feedback I've gotten about fireworks on Canada Day is it's light so late at night that the small kids can't stay up to actually see it. On Halloween, you can't, it's dark by 6 o'clock at night. So Halloween might be a good option. Fire hazard is generally lower in the fall than it is in the summertime. Yeah, so just a question for whoever wants to respond.
If I may add to that, one of the other things too is contractors are more available
Mhm.
and costs will likely be lower. That's fine.
So I can't make any motions or anything as chair, but if somebody wanted to, it'd be great to be able to include an option for maybe doing it at a different date, such as Halloween. Councilor Haas.
I appreciate that, because I mean, that doesn't stop the drones also from being late on Canada Day if that were a direction, but. It would definitely, because I mean, it's gotta be dark for them too, so it would definitely, another date I thought in my head, but it's still light out too, is in, you know, trying to. Incorporate into Alberta Culture Days, but that's late during that time as well, and would have to be late. So I would amend that to having the costs for both Canada Day, not both, both, but what are the costs for Canada Day, what are the costs for, say, in October? And the savings that potentially that would also, to make sure that the community knows part of, you know, we have looked at Canada Day, but maybe there's better savings. And again, it's also darker and fire hazard if we do that way, so, yeah, does that help administration, or is that what you were driving at, Councilor Stashik?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much what I was getting at, yeah.
Yeah, so I'd be happy to make that amendment if the rest of council's okay with that.
Council, is there any opposition to that amendment? Okay. All right, so we do have an amended consensus request. Are there any comments or questions?
Just, sorry if I'm being
Mhm.
clear, so that's to put it in the parking lot for that information to come to us, correct?
Yes, yep, that's
Perfect.
my understanding, yep.
Awesome,
What information?
the pricings,
Alternatives.
alternatives and the pricings.
So the drone alternatives, the different date alternatives.
Yes, okay, good, yes, thank you.
And when, sorry, may I ask a question?
Mhm.
When would that information be needed prior to final budget?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Next Tuesdays.
yes, for this budget discussions is where the information to make an informed decision on whether to proceed with it or not. Okay, so we do have a consensus request that we'll call the question to parking lot for 2024 Canada Day with fireworks, pending additional information regarding alternative displays and dates. So, council, all those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. That brings us to the end of the list for operating business cases. Administration, is there any other direction that you need today before you go away and have to vote?
As a chair, two members of council, no, I want to thank everyone. I know this has been a long 2 nights for everybody here, but this is very valuable information for us to go back and create a budget that we think will be supportive. I mentioned before on the numbers, those are going to change. You know, again, those are preliminary numbers made back in August. I understand that those numbers are high. But they are what they are, and we wanted to bring forward what we were looking at in our best estimates at that point. I also wanted to leave council with some stats that I thought were interesting for everybody when putting, because I understand that percentage increases are paid attention to, and you know, they're interesting, and that's what the public will latch on to. But I also think it's important to put that into context. I took our 10 comparable municipalities, and I did a little bit of a case study on what would the average home in the 10 other comparable communities pay versus Hinton. And I just want to share that the average comparable per year for taxes and utilities, franchise fees would pay $4,163. Hinton would pay $2,309. So comparable communities are paying 80% more. Per house. I'd also like to, another calculation that municipalities would use is what percentage of your income are you actually spending on municipal goods and services? An interesting stat that I also found was Hinton has the highest after-tax income among all our comparables. Pay 80% less, or comparables pay 80% more. And the burn rate calculation is 5.5% with our average comparables. 5.5% of their after-tax income goes towards municipal goods and services. In Hinton, that's 2.7%. So the burn rate on those is 104% more in comparable municipalities. So this isn't a justification, but it's an interesting stat to put some things into perspective of where we're at. Because I can tell you that, you know, I think we're all great, but we're not 80% better at producing a very similar level of service with other communities. And we don't have an 80% less, we don't have 80% less services. So, you know, I just want council to keep that in mind is, you know, a lot of it is pushed off, and I think that we should be looking at management or financial management and look at it from a long-term perspective. You know, a good example is solid waste bins. So we cut it by 25%. That's okay. We'll get by this year. Next year, if we want to comply with the 5%, if we want to comply with a 5% replacement rate, which is a fairly, I think, a fairly good conservative replacement rate over a long period of time. But next year, that'd be 75%, right? So we didn't save 25%. We just aren't going to pay or $25,000 this year, but the cost is still there. The bins still need to be replaced. So it's just a little bit of something to keep in mind when we're looking at your operational budget, because it is important to look at sustainability as a key aspect of the budget. We have to be reasonable. I'm a ratepayer and I quite enjoy low taxes, you know, but I think we also have to balance that among sustainability for the community. But, you know, we are significant. We are by far the lowest cost municipality in terms of our rates among all of our comparable municipalities. So that's a good thing. That's a really good thing, and for the community. So I just wanted to give council a little bit of that perspective to go away with, and we'll have pick up this discussion again in November.
Great. Thank you, CEO Panasic. You have a couple questions, I think, mostly Taylor.
Isn't a lot of that due to the fact that we have a big ratepayer in town that pays 25% towards our tax base? And that's allowed us to keep the taxes lower than surrounding towns, they just don't have that advantage that we have. So that's the reason why we're so low, because we have that advantage.
That's part of it. We're also at a 60% residential rate for our taxes, which isn't overly uncommon. 80% is when you're getting into the trouble zone. 60% is a fairly good balance between non-residential and residential. So yeah, we do have industry that has supported that. But we're certainly still low on all of these. When it comes to ensuring that we are having a sustainable services for the long term. We have two levers to pull it. And one of the recommendations will be we have to start pulling one of them, right? And that's we're reducing expenses through services, and or we are looking at increasing rates. But it's coming to a little bit of a head. We've kept things low for a very long time, while others have looked at infrastructure deficit as a real impending threat and increased rates accordingly. I think we're there, and we're making steps in the right direction in that front, but it's there, and I want to make sure that everybody's aware, and even the public, that that's a real consideration for the future.
Thank you for that.
Can I follow up?
Sure, I'm gonna follow first, right? We're not unique in that situation. Whitecourt has, I believe, two major employers within town limits, and they're one of our main comparables. So, holding West Fraser or Mondi or whoever it is, or both of them up as, the savior of Hinton, and that's why we are the way we are. Doesn't hold all the water that it does for some people. For me, like I said, Whitecourt's comparable. In fact, I believe so. Did you have a follow-up, Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, the numbers that would be more meaningful to me would be the how much we spend versus how much other people spend. Or we're sitting with that, or some of our expenditures, our services that we're providing. That would balance out the tax thing. Yeah, there might be one or two towns that have are lucky and have industrial things in them too, but not all of them do.
Council, further, Councillor Ross?
If I may, when I'm listening to what you're saying, I think what comes to my mind is some of these decisions is just deferring it. We saw that during COVID, people deferred payments, deferred, but I mean, at the end of the day, you're still gonna have to pay it, and it's being careful. We're not obviously deferring too many to the next year, because then we're either paying more or the same amount at some point, along with everything else. So I appreciate the words, I appreciate the stats, and it is definitely good food for thought moving forward. When we're making that final decision. So thank you for that.
One other comment related to that too, though, is that we are lucky. We have that advantage. We do have the low taxes, but there's always balance and the challenge between narrative and truth. And the fact is, it's hard. I fight it all the time, because every time we have one of these discussions, comparables come up, and I've noted it before, I've stated it before. Our taxes are actually significantly lower than our comparables, exactly what you just said. But that doesn't find its way to the public, and what we get from the public is, our taxes are too high. But that's not actually true. That's the narrative that you're saying. But in reality, we're actually very fortunate in the tax rates and how much it costs us to live here in Hinton compared to the services that we get. I think that's something council's likely aware of, and there's a challenge in communicating that out to the public. And honestly, I think we should be shouting that from the rooftops to get people to come here, to get businesses to invest here. Look at how advantageous it is to be in Hinton. Councillor House.
Yeah, and along that note too, I mean, I think the other balance to that too is to the community to understand that some of the costs to live in our community are out of our control. You know, I heard that there was questions about groceries at the forum. I heard there's questions about gas prices. These are all things that are not in our preview that, you know, those an added expense. So having those low tax dollars, you know, but I think there's that idea out there that that's something in our preview that it's not. So I think we do need to push that forward, absolutely, you know. And I guess one thing that I just want to end is, you know, at the end of the day, lower taxes is not bringing people into our community. We haven't increased our population because of lower taxes. If anything, some of our residents have left, seniors, because of the lack of some of the services they need. So I think we need to really look at that, and what brings people in are anonymities, things, a good place to live, not necessarily low taxes. So I think that's where we're moving towards, and that's why I like this budget. We're starting to innovate in certain areas, slowly starting to build efficiencies, you know, standards as well. And I think that's what grows a community. So yeah, that's just what I have to say. Thank you. My
Thank
thoughts.
you, Councillor House, council. Any further? Okay, oh, sorry, Councillor Reese.
I just wanna say, you know, initially I'm going, you know, I saw how you had laid out this budget process and I'm thinking. It's not how we used to do it, but it went so smoothly. It was really a good 2 days. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reese, Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, it's nice, but we're still at 7.7 to 8% tax increase, which is not workable. Okay, so we haven't smoothed out all the details yet. Thanks.
But we still got days to go.
Okay, good.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Taylor. So if there's nothing else, just before I call for a motion to adjourn, on behalf of council, I want to thank everybody too. Been a couple of long evenings and long days, and you know, you guys work all day and I come here all night, so thank you for that. We appreciate the time and effort, and look forward to the budget process moving forward. So with that, I ask for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Lord.
I'd like to adjourn.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council motion to adjourn. All those in favor? That's carried. Adjourned.